My hand already fell off. I hope you don't mind if I take some clothes off. This is pretty hot after being outside in the cold. Hi, I'm John Johnson, and I was born in New York in 1815, and there, as I was growing up, I met with my wife, Emma, and we had 3 kids, and things were tough over there in New York, so a lot of people were moving out west. We moved out into Wisconsin and spent several years there, and it seemed to be really tough there too, and we were hearing news coming in from Minnesota that things were happening there. People were moving into new lands, and so I put this map together on what, and I know you can't really see everything, the towns and stuff like that, but I'll point them out. We got the Twin Cities up here. We've got Red Wing over in here, all the way down to Sioux Falls here. And this is a wobbly stick. Can't be my hand. So what we did as a Johnson family is we moved on into Minnesota, and we came up to the Red Wing area up in here. This is Red Wing. You've got the Twin Cities up in here, Mankato here, Graham Lakes here, and Sioux Falls here. We moved over to Janesville, which is about 10 miles from Mankato. And I have to tell you a little bit about this map, what the map is all about. This was 1869 that these events happened. It had just been opened up, the roads had been opened up to Laverne by Philo Hawes. He was operating out of Red Wing, and he was a stage operator and a Pony Express guy. And he was running lines to Faribault, to Mankato, down to Blue Earth. And in 1867, I believe, he was contracted by the government to open up a line from Blue Earth all the way to Sioux Falls to Yankton. And contrary to what people think, he didn't just bust a road himself. He was using the old military trails that in the 50s, they were down here chasing Indians all over the place, and they built military roads. There was a big one from Mankato to the Graham Lakes and through. There was others too, but they don't pertain to the story here. And Philo Hawes was contracted to run this stage line and Pony Express from Blue Earth over west. And it came up here to Jackson, angled up to the Graham Lakes. Worthington hadn't been, there was no Worthington then yet. And from the Graham Lakes, it came down past about where Wilmont, well, there was a junction here. And this was what they called the old trail, another military trail. There was a junction at the Graham Lakes where they met together. They came down and on into Laverne. And if you actually look at County Road 9 that goes past the landfill, they basically came in about in that area. And down around the bend, which is called Darlene's Bend, that was actually Eugene Darling that settled there. That's where they got the name Darlene's Bend. And then the road came down to a mile north of here, which is Norton's Hill, Norton's Crossing. That was the favored crossing into Laverne before any bridges were built. So when this whole thing came down, the Lewises, well, me and the kids, I had a 19-year-old son by now, and we were living in Janesville, and things were really tough. It was just a brutal winter in 69 and 70, and we were not starving, but we were close. We were getting desperate, and so Lewis and I were going up to Mankato, maybe for 2, 3, 4 day stretches, getting any kind of a job we could get. And we were up here. There was a blizzard March 8th, and it was a 6-day blizzard. Everything was locked down. Well, that finally blew away, and the temperatures were horrible and everything. We were back up in Mankato, and from the Pony Express line of Philo houses down to here came word from Sioux Falls that they were in desperately need of food and supplies. There was a mill up by Le Sueur up there, and they got together 2 loads of flour and other supplies, and they brought them down to Mankato, but the guys that brought them down absolutely would not go any further. They didn't want anything to do with going out into the open plains in the wintertime, because it was crazy. So Lewis and I volunteered to take both wagons, but it looked like it was going to be tough taking 2 wagons, and Lewis didn't have a lot of experience. So another guy that got recruited was a guy by the name of Hector Sharp, and he was living down in this area about 10, 12 miles south of Mankato, and he had been up looking for work too. So he volunteered to take the 2nd wagon. Lewis and I took the 1st wagon, and being very used to traveling in the wintertime, we stocked up on a lot of quilts, clothes, food, just ready for anything, we thought. And so on the about the 15th or the 16th, we left the 2 rigs, left Mankato, and the temperatures right now were running around in the 30 degrees and stuff like that. So it was actually pretty nice going, but when we got out into the open prairie, it was very intimidating, because all of a sudden it was just nothing out there. It was flat, a little bit rolling, but all snow. And as we get further down, there's fewer and fewer places where there was any groves, any trees, anything else like that. But we made it down without incident to the Graham Lake area, right in here. And we were met by the townspeople. Were excited. We got in there in the morning, and they were excited. They wanted us to stick around because everybody was really looking for somebody to talk to them and stuff like that. But we told them what desperate need they needed down here in Sioux Falls. So we moved on, and the day continued balmy for about 2 hours. And all of a sudden, the sky to the north and the northwest took on this crazy look, and we were going, oh boy. And we got about 4 miles out when it hit. And it just started out with a few puffs, and pretty soon stronger puffs, and the next thing it was a full-blown gale. And the temperature dropped within a couple of hours, dang near down to 0. And we knew we were in trouble. It was getting towards afternoon. We hadn't gone very far, so we made camp. And we gutted it out overnight. It was not a pleasant experience. It was very, very cold and bitter. And we figured, okay, if we tried to go back, we were going face into the wind. If we kept going forward the next morning, we would take it as it comes, but figured this should blow out. Well, the next morning, the wind was the same, but the temperature was probably another 10 degrees colder yet. We headed out, and we made it about from the Graham Lakes down the line a little bit. It was getting to the point where we couldn't see the trail anymore, even though the Pony Express had been over there stuff. And we got really cold. The wind was just going right through us. We had no idea how ferocious an unchecked prairie prairie storm could be out there. So we had been moving along, like I say, for several hours. We noticed that Hector, our other guy behind us, was getting farther and farther back and getting very erratic. And finally, we thought we better check on Hector. And I tried to get out of the wagon. My feet had gone numb several hours before. I tried to get out of the wagon. My feet were frozen solid. So Lewis crawled out of the wagon. He went back to check on Hector, came back, fought his way back through the snow and the wind and everything with some pretty grim news. Hector had been dead for a couple of hours already, frozen. And Hector was basically frozen in the seat. We left him. We didn't know what else to do. We got going further down the line, another 3-4 miles, and the horses were starting to struggle. So it got to the point where we knew we couldn't pull this wagon anymore. And fortunately, part of our back in Mankato, we had loaded a sled on. So we unloaded the sled, or I should say Lewis did, because I couldn't even get out of the wagon. He got the sled unloaded, hooked up to the horse. One horse was down already, hooked up to the other horse, and put me on top of the sled and wrapped me up in quilts and stuff like that and started pulling along. Well, we got down not very far, probably hit a snowdrift, I don't know. I fell off the sled, and Lewis got about 30 feet before he saw what happened. He stopped, he came back and wrapped me up tighter, and the last thing I could kind of remember, it was getting really hot in here for some reason, and I couldn't think, and I was having trouble breathing, and the last thing I remembered was Lewis shaking me by the arm, the shoulder. Pa, I've got to find shelter for us. I'll be back for you. And Lewis went off. So the next day, I had to take this hat off. Not the next day. In the papers after that, there was a federal mortality and census report. And that report said that the U.S. government did a census every other year or something like this. And this report came out in June of 1870. And the report listed Lewis Johnson and John Johnson as froze to death. And it was, since they came out of Janesville, this was in the Waseca County listings. That was the only listings of their death. Hector Sharp was listed in the Olmsted County, which is over by Rochester. It must be where he came from. And also in the Minnehaha County, Dakota Territory. It was listed that he died there. They, so the next morning on the 23rd, the people in the Graham Lakes area had been really, really concerned about these guys going out and getting hit with the blizzard. They gathered everybody together, probably all 12 of them, and they went out on a search party. Well, 6 miles out, they found Hector frozen. And they moved on, and they came upon John. And you notice I switched to third party now. They came upon to John, and John was all bundled up in the quilts, froze solid. And the horse and sled was 30 feet away, and in between the horse and sled was Lewis, face down, frozen. The people in Graham Lakes sent back for some wagons, a couple of teams of horses, because they knew that supplies had to get through. And they brought in a couple of teams of horses, and they also sent a rider ahead to the Laverne settlement to see what they were going to do with these three guys, because they couldn't bury them, they didn't have shovels, they just threw them on the wagons. And so they warned them about the grisly thing that was coming back towards them. This all happened, if anybody knows where Wilmot is, just a few miles east of Wilmot is where this all happened. Anyway, so the Graham Lakes people hauled the two wagons, and when they got down below Norton's Hill there, they were met by a grave detail party. And this party had been warned ahead of time, a day ahead, and with picks and shovels, they had dug a couple of graves up on top of Norton's Hill where there was a couple other burials up there, and the spot was disputed railroad land up there. So they took them out there and took care of this. The wagons proceeded on to Sioux Falls. Anybody have any questions? That was, and right there, we wouldn't know what this story was all about, but this marker has been up there on the hill for I don't know how many years. It was 1962 the first time I ever saw it up there, and have been just following it for years. And we eventually ended up with this land. I picked this up because nature was destroying it. We're putting in a new marker for them. That's in the process. Where's
Norton's Hill? Who owns that now?
We do.
Oh, it's your? Okay.
Yeah. So it was just kind of ironic that way back in 1962 I was watching this, and I'm still watching it. And through all the research we did, I can guarantee you we came up with more questions than we did answers. So we've got probably a couple minutes if anybody wants to ask a question. I'm done.
How did you put this all together? Were there like diaries from the people that came across them, or?
Well, in Rock County history books, there is zero evidence that we've ever been able to find that any of this happened. But there's a Rose history book in Nobles County, and they talk about the incident all the way from the Graham Lakes and down to where they died. The other was going through U.S. censuses, findagrave.com, ancestries.com, visited with a lot of different historical society places to fill in the gaps, and we filled in most of the gaps, but we still don't know why there was nothing ever said about it in Rock County, because it would have been an event by then, because Rock County in 1870 had about 130 people in the whole county, including the town. So that would have been quite an impact, but someday. Put it back. Okay, thank you. Huh? Yeah. I'll get my pointer hand.